Hello there, I'm Greg Holben. I'm president of the Richland Rotary Club. I want to welcome all of our guests in attendance today. Should be a great meeting, great program by General Mattis. Please rise for the March on the Colors and remain standing for the Marine Corps hymn and the posting of the colors. Phil Emily, would you lead the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jan Griffin, invocation, please.
Gracious God, we give you thanks today for the sacrifices of generations of courageous people who have come to the defense of our country and of liberty around the world. Help it to inspire us in groups like Rotary to do all we can at home and abroad to further fellowship and understanding, to relieve suffering and poverty. We thank you for our special guest today, General Mattis, and a time to gather as a larger community to hear from him and to remember those who even today are very much in harm's way. And we thank you for the food that furnishes energy to our lives. Amen.
Amen. Please take your seats. I'd like to introduce Philip Lemley at this time. Oh, I'm sorry.
Present arms. Order. Arms. Ready, cut. Center. Peace. Forward. March. Hold. Shoulder. Arms. Ready, cut. Forward, march.
Once again, this is Philip Lemley.
Good afternoon, everyone. The first thing we want to do this afternoon is recognize all of the veterans in our audience this afternoon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call out each branch of the military and ask you to stand and remain standing until we've recognized everyone, and then you can sit down. So first thing I want to do is all veterans from the Merchant Marines, please stand. Okay. Next would be the Coast Guard. The next would be the Army.
Go Army, beat Navy.
The next would be the Air Force. Did I say the Navy? No. Oh, the Navy?
You better.
Well, as a Marine, we try to forget that we were a part of the Navy, but the Navy. And last but not least, the Marine Corps. Please help me. We want to thank everyone for their service, of course, and in the cause for freedom for our country. Now I would like to recognize any disabled veterans in our group. Would any disabled veterans please stand? Okay, thank you for your service. Even though all the veterans' contributions are significant and greatly appreciated, I want to recognize one veteran in particular today. He is Carlos Ben Benjamin, a United States Marine Corps veteran of World War II with a Purple Heart from the Battle of Iwo Jima. Ben, will you please stand? You're welcome. He told me earlier that there's getting to be less and less of them. The last thing that we want to do is to recognize our Gold Star mother. Our Gold Star mother in attendance this afternoon is Lori Talent and her husband, Lauren. Mrs. Talent's son, Marine Corps Sergeant Travis Pfister, served in Iraq as a CH-46 crew chief with the Purple Foxes. That's the Marine Medium Helicopter Squadron 364 Purple Foxes. Sergeant Pfister paid the ultimate price for freedom on February the 7th, 2007. Semper Fi. I've told this story before, but I was asked to tell this story again about all the red tape that I had to go through to get General Mattis to come. Ever since I was the program chairman for Richland Rotary for 3 years, and once I realized that General Mattis was from this area, I started trying to get in contact with him. We have 52 programs every year that we do. We don't have to do, we do. And, you know, it becomes difficult to get speakers, so I was trying to get the general to come. Like I said, once I realized he was from this area, so I started trying to contact the Marine Corps. I tried with the Marine Corps Reserve Unit in Yakima. Then I tried with a couple of different places in D.C., Marine Corps offices in D.C., and they just totally ignored me. I didn't get anything back. I even tried to contact the author of a book that was written about the general. Same thing, no response whatsoever. So this summer, early summer, I was doorbelling, knocking on doors for my re-election campaign. I knocked on this door in North Richland, very short ways from here, and this lady came to the door, and I told her what I was there for, and we talked for a couple of minutes, and as I turned to leave, I noticed a small Marine Corps emblem on the mailbox. And so I stopped and I said, "Who is the Marine in the house?" And she said, "Well, my son's in the Marine Corps." And I said, "Well, I was in the Marine Corps 40 years ago." She said, "Well, my son's been in the Marine Corps for 40 years. And I said, "What's your name?" She said, "Lucille Mattis." I said, "You're General Mattis's mom?" She said, "Yes." So we talked for a few minutes, and I left, went on my way. Several days later, I got email from General Mattis that said, "Hey, Marine, I'll be there November the 1st." So the power of the mom overcame all of that red tape. And it's my honor this afternoon to introduce the General's mother, Lucille Mattis. Okay, here we go. We are so honored, and I'm extremely proud to introduce to all of his admirers, friends, and guests gathered here this afternoon, our very special guest, Richland's own, one of the few, the proud, the Marines, General James Mattis. General Mattis graduated from Richland High in 1968. Go Bombers. As a matter of fact, the person that gave him his diploma back in 1968 is sitting at this table today, Mary Gay. He then went on to attend and graduate from Central Washington University and was commissioned a second lieutenant in 1972. Since that day, the General has done very well for himself, our country, and his hometown area. General Mattis has commanded at multiple levels. As a lieutenant, he served as a rifle and weapons platoon commander in the 3rd Marine Division. As a captain, he commanded a rifle and weapons company in the 1st Marine Brigade. As a major, he commanded recruiting station Portland. As a lieutenant colonel, he commanded 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, one of Task Force Ripper's assault battalions in Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. As a colonel, he commanded 7th Marines Reinforced. Upon becoming a brigadier general, he commanded first the 1st Marine Expeditionary Brigade and then Task Force 58, which, by the way, was the first time a Marine has commanded a naval task force. That was during Operation Enduring Freedom in southern Afghanistan. As a major general, he commanded the 1st Marine Division during the initial attack and subsequent stability operations in Iraq during Operations Iraqi Freedom. In his first tour as a lieutenant general, he commanded the Marine Corps' Combat Development Command and also served as the deputy commandant for combat development. He also commanded the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force and served as the commander of U.S. Marine Forces Central Command. Previous to this assignment, he served concurrently as both NATO's Supreme Allied Commander, Transformation from 2007 to 2009, and as Commander U.S. Joint Forces Command from 2007 to 2010. General Mattis is also a graduate of the Amphibious Warfare School, Marine Corps Command and Staff College, and the National War College. General was nominated by President Obama on July the 1st, 2010, to be the commander of U.S. Central Command. He was confirmed on August 5th by the Senate Armed Service Committee and took formal command on August 11th, 2010 at MacDill Air Force Base. Ladies and gentlemen, here sits a shining example of the Marine Corps' honor, courage, and commitment, and exemplifies the slogan, "No better friend, no worse enemy." Please rise. Please help me give a warm Richland, Rotary, and guest welcome to General James Mattis.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's really something to be introduced by a Marine. Phil, as you can understand, we consider you part of the old Corps now, which is a real statement of esteem, of course, among currently serving Marines. Unfortunately, I'm old enough now to be the grandfather of most of the currently serving Marines, so I feel like I'm the old Corps personified. And when he went through the list of jobs, it's obvious that I've never been able to hold one for very long. But obviously, my mother helped you write the introduction to make it that nice. Only she could have written that. I noticed the police force is here in strength today, which immediately Chief Skinner, having brought in the Kennewick police as well. It's obvious my reputation as a juvenile delinquent preceded me, and you're ready for me. But ladies and gentlemen, I can't tell you how delightful it is to be back in Richland. I flew back in Friday actually, from Saudi Arabia. And you have no idea how beautiful Richland looks until you've been in Saudi Arabia before coming here. But it was really a delight to be invited to come back here. And I cannot tell you the number of times I've zipped myself into some sleeping bag on some rocky hillside, wondering what I was going to do in the morning. And I would think about swimming the Columbia River or hunting down in Wallula or camping up in the Blue Mountains. And I just tell you, this is heaven on earth. I know most of you have probably already figured that out, but you come back here and it's really obvious to me. I'll tell you, it's also a pleasure to be in front of Rotary. In a world where a lot of people seem to be out for themselves, Rotary is an example, I think, for all of us of what it means to put service to others before yourself. And I love what Rotary stands for. I think it's part of the solution for whatever ails our country these days. And from what you've done on polio to what you do, I think it's with your duck run, with the money you get from that for the local kids. I mean, just a friendly spirit that you bring to everything you do, and it was obvious here already. What I thought I'd do, ladies and gentlemen, since you were kind enough to have me for lunch, is just talk for a few minutes, but really what I want to do is hear from you and answer questions. I've decided after many years of having to testify in front of the Senate or the Congress and all, that I was not going to give all my speeches in Washington, D.C. to the same old crowd. And I owe this town a great deal because it gave me the values that allow me to be where I'm at today. And I'll tell you that that doesn't come easily in the topsy-turvy career that I chose for myself. But I can fall back on what I learned here in this town and its schools, from its teachers. Mary, what a surprise that I achieved that diploma from you that day. You're right. But it was this town that formed me, and I really do owe you. And I'm also not just a Marine, I'm a U.S. Marine, and if what we're doing right now overseas, where I've got 200 and some odd thousand young Americans serving on ships and up in the mountains and all, if what we're doing can't stand the light of day or can't stand answering your questions, we ought to change it. So I'm also here to learn something today and get back in touch with my roots, which I'm very, very proud of. Let me just tell you that I left town in 1968. By 1979, I was serving in the Middle East, and I've basically served there ever since. I've been serving off and on in the Middle East and gotten to know it a little bit. And the area that I'm now responsible for, you can see it in color on the map. It stretches from Egypt over here to the west. I was never so happy that it stopped at the western edge as when Libya blew up. Because really I have plenty of problems already. When I walk into offices in Washington, D.C., they're usually not happy to see me. It goes all the way up into Kazakhstan, up into Siberia. This is Russia up here. Obviously Pakistan and Afghanistan. Drops all the way down to Yemen, down here. Oman, the Gulf area, Saudi Arabia, where I was a couple days ago. It's got the problems of Iraq, and then it's got my biggest single problem, which of course is Iran. And that's what I thought I'd talk. I've never seen the region for all these years that I've served there, ladies and gentlemen. I've never seen it in so much turmoil. And I'll tell you this right now, the Middle East is never going back to what it once was. It will never be the same. It's over. We're now going to have to deal with a Middle East that right now doesn't know where it's going. It's too early to tell with all of these revolutions going on. Are they going to turn out into democracies, or are they going to be new autocrats, new dictatorships? I don't know. Nobody knows right now. There's a lot of decisions, a lot of things have to happen. But the reason I wanted to talk to you for just a minute about it is that it's also an area that no matter how frustrated we get, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot turn our backs on. It's the nature of the times. It's because of the accident of history that we live in America at this point in time. There's a number of things we can do in this part of the region which are very influential. They have nothing to do with the military. But the bottom line is that for those of the families who've paid what to us is an irredeemable debt, we cannot at this point simply say, I'm tired of it and I've got to walk out. The world will not permit us to do it, and I recognize fully the sense of frustration and how difficult it's been to articulate this war to all of us here. It's a very complex one, and what's at stake here is the future peace. And that's why it's not that we want to fight a war. I've fought many, many times in this region. If I never fight again, it'd be too soon. But I will tell you that we are going to have to do something to stay engaged diplomatically, economically, culturally, educationally, all those ways. But also I will tell you that in the quiet of their offices when we're alone, the leaders in this part of the world, by and large, trust America more than they trust any country that borders them. And that really says something. And again, I've studied the area for a while. I know now how little I know about it after 30 years of serving there. But it is definitely an area we're going to remain engaged in. The point I would make, too, about the troops that I have, you're going to hear a lot that the military's broken or the military's got morale problems. It's simply not the case. I know that people tell generals what they think generals want to hear, but I know the troops pretty well. I've served out there since I was a very young officer, and in 5 minutes of walking on board a ship or coming into a combat outpost, I can tell you if it's a happy outpost or an unhappy one. The troops' morale is very, very high. And you say, how can that be with the grievous casualties we've taken? I don't know how. And anyone who says they know is probably fibbing. But the bottom line, I'll give you an example. I was over there a couple months ago, and I was walking back to join up with my group. I'd stopped to shoot the breeze with some of the lads. I was with a Marine unit in the most difficult part of Afghanistan, what's called the Helmand River Valley. And 2 Marines completely soaking wet with very clean rifles were walking towards me. They'd obviously just been down in an irrigation canal washing. That was the best shower they could get where they live. I said, hey, how you young guys doing? And the 2 Marines, both very young, infantrymen. Where'd they get their name? Infantry, infant soldier, young soldier. These 2 boys, probably not old enough to buy a beer legally, Chief. I said, how you guys doing? And they said, living the dream, General, living the dream, just happy-go-lucky. And this unit had been in very serious combat. These were not novices, they weren't recruits, they may have been young, but they knew what they were into. So what do we do in this region? How do we try to make sense of a region in so much turmoil? First of all, you understand I nest all my efforts inside the foreign policy of the United States. That's the bottom line. So what's the foreign policy? What guides us over there? There's really 4 principles that we've come up with. One is we support democratic reform. We're at their own pace. Now, I'll tell you that democratic reform here in Egypt, with a 5,000-year-old civilization, it's the center of cultural learning in the Arab world. It's a very different place than, say, down here in Yemen, which is a tribal society that at times I think I went back 3,000 years when I'm down there as I wander through. So each country's got to reform at its own pace. The second of the 4 principles is economic reform. More people in this part of the world have to feel like if there's a lot of money being made, they get some too. By and large, you have only a very small group of haves and a large group of have-nots. It creates no sense of ownership, no sense of fondness for one another, and the result is exactly what you can expect when people don't have hope. The third point is right over here, Israel and Palestine. The current situation between those 2 peoples is unsustainable. We're going to have to find a way for a 2-state solution. If we do not, then we will continue to see warfare as it keeps the kettle boiling out there. Now, Republican and Democratic administrations for many, many years in America have said you need 2 states. You need one for Israel, Jewish state, and you need one for the Palestinians so they have a home. And until we get there, you're going to continue to read in the newspaper, in the Tri-City Herald every morning, that there's been some more rocket fire shot back and forth and this sort of thing. It demands a political solution, and that is part of what we work toward. And there are many, many quiet things we do when we deal with the military and civilian leaders in this part of the world to try to bring them together. But at the same time, I would just tell you that as someone who grew up in the American West, I'm reminded that you can't care more about other people's children than they care. They're going to have to want it themselves one of these days. It's going to be very, very tough. If we don't keep the peace there, then it will be a war like no other. I will just tell you that no matter what you remember in the past of Yom Kippur, of Desert Storm, or anything like that, it would be very, very ugly. So that is why you see so much of Secretary Clinton's efforts go in to trying to keep this peace effort at least alive until we can get them to a point they can make accommodations for each other and compromise. The fourth pillar, then, political reform, economic reform at their own pace. Every country is different. Peace between Israel and Palestine. And the last one is how do we keep the violent extremists, you know them as Al-Qaeda, and there's a host of others, and Iran, a purveyor of state-sponsored terrorism, from becoming territorial, from disrupting what's going on, changing borders, just funding terrorists and keeping them on the loose. You can imagine this keeps me rather busy, and I would tell you that the underlying effort that I have that underlies everything is I do everything I can in dealing with these folks out there. That's okay. That little guy can only add to the intelligence of my remarks here. Keep them right in. But the bottom line is that I really have to work as quietly as I can, constantly talking with people out there. How do we prevent another war? If I had to tell you what my real job is, that's my job, okay? And you do that in 100 different ways, quiet ways. We can get into some of that in the questions and answers. I'd like to just talk for a couple more minutes, then open it to what's on your mind so we actually address something that's interesting to you. If you get tired of listening to me, but before I get tired of talking, you wave your hand and I'll stop talking and we'll go right to questions and answers, okay? We are pulling out of Iraq. Now, you look at Iraq, you can see it lies at the geopolitical center of the Middle East. It right now is a democracy, imperfect, terrible policies to some degree. We have families that have paid a price in order to give the Iraqi people the opportunity to come up with charting their own course. It has been interesting to me, ladies and gentlemen, as you hear about riots in Cairo, a war in Libya, you've got riots in Jordan and in Bahrain. It's interesting that in Iraq there's no riots. Wonder why that is. Could it be that there they feel they have a democracy, and there they have some say-so, so they don't have to riot, they can go down and vote? I don't know. I don't want to draw conclusions because things in my region generally are not as good or as bad as they initially seem. But I'll just tell you that there is something going on there that shows a difference from what it was when it was under Saddam Hussein. Now, sincere, patriotic Americans can agree or disagree whether we ever should have gone there. I have a love affair with the U.S. Constitution, and when the President of the United States says do something, from me comes just 3 words, aye, aye, sir, and we go do it. We do it ethically, we do it morally, and we were defined by the unselfish young people who joined. Remember, no draft, like when I came out of high school, looked beyond all the hot political rhetoric, joined up, and served their country. So we've given the Iraqi people a chance. The commander-in-chief has decided. Here a couple weeks ago, I got the orders that said if they do not give us absolute immunity from the courts and the jails, we will not put our troops there. We will not allow a courtroom there to hold one of our troops for an alleged crime. They were unable politically to make that decision, to do that, and so we're not going to be leaving a large number of troops there. I'll have a few hundred, but we're not going to stop working with them. I'll be there in mid-December. I'll be back in Baghdad sometime in January. We'll keep working with these people and try to get them connected to the countries around them. But remember, this country here, Iraq, has attacked Iran. It has occupied Kuwait. It has infuriated and tried to kill Saudis. And it's now a democracy. How do you change that legacy and get people to trust each other? It is very, very difficult. Another area we just talked to for a moment here is, of course, Afghanistan. And Afghanistan, you see where it lies between Iran and Pakistan. We have made tremendous progress in the security realm. We have not made as much progress on governance and on economic development. What is the progress on security? The enemy has lost leaders. They've lost all their havens, safe havens in Afghanistan. They've lost logistics, and they've really lost heart in a lot of areas. But it's still a hard fight, and of course it abuts that very problematic, imperfect ally, Pakistan. Now let me just say a few things about this situation in Afghanistan. You remember what you all felt like on the 12th of September 2001. That situation is still a potential there if we don't break the enemy's spirit and build up an army that can control this, not ours, the Afghan army. As you look at this, when I come back to the United States, and I'm not back here a lot, but it's interesting to see on our news, you would think that the Americans are doing all the fighting in Afghanistan. That's simply not the case. The largest wartime coalition in recent memory, 49 nations, are alongside us. 3 of those nations have lost more boys per capita than the United States has. I was just up in Estonia here recently to thank them. They're one of the nations that's lost more troops than we have per capita. Pakistan, next door, for all of our troubles with them, and we always talk about the 10% we disagree on, has lost more troops killed and wounded in this war than all of NATO combined. Now you think of what you read about Pakistan every day in the paper, or you think how little you read about the 48 other nations standing by us, you say, what are you talking about? So at times our news media, trying to explain this very complex war, is focused primarily where? On the American people, of course. They're the American press. But it's not the whole story. At the same time, it is a very challenging fight. It is the worst terrain I have ever fought on in decades of fighting. The Hindu Kush and the mountains along that border, Mount Rainier would be dwarfed up there in that mountain range. Just giving it that, the highest mountain in our state would be dwarfed among all the peaks that we fight among up there. So it's a tough fight. Probably the biggest challenge for anyone who's not engaged in it the way I am, and over there, and I first went there, as you heard from Phil's introduction, I first went there 60 days after 9/11. I was landing in Afghanistan and fighting our way up in southern Afghanistan. What is difficult to understand, if you keep reading the bad news, is that progress and violence can coexist. The violence is so heartbreaking when you read about women and children being just murdered for no reason. There's no valid reason for it. It has nothing to do with being a devout Muslim. I always read that, we took a prisoner and he's a devout Muslim. There's nothing devout about a man who kills women and children. I don't care what religion he's part of. They are losing any kind of support they ever had among the Afghan people. So the progress there in education, in health care, in governance, in security is real, but the violence goes on. And the enemy has figured out how to convince you it's going wrong. They will set off a big bomb, they'll kill people, it'll be put on all of our news, and the sense is, the image is, one that we're going backwards. I understand that. None of us will ever be sanguine about the idea that bombs could be going off and somehow that we're still having progress. It just blinds you to the progress because it's really a terrible thing. But we are making progress there. I'm in Islamabad in Pakistan every month or two, meeting with General Kiani. If one of you were to stand up and say, why do we deal with Pakistan? How could you be doing this? After all, they're helping our enemies and all at times. I would answer, because we have national interests at stake and we've got to deal with Pakistan. But General Kiani would be asked the same question if he was in Karachi talking today at noon. Why are you dealing with those Americans who've sold us down the drain so many times when we fought the Soviets with them and they left us behind? So it's the confusing, complex international play back and forth in the midst of this war that makes this war so complex and so difficult, even for me, I've spent 30 some odd years out here, to explain. But at the same time, they've been wonderful allies the Pakistanis have at times. When I went into Afghanistan, the Pakistan military, I met with them ahead of time, and they knew my H-hour, they knew D-Day, and they knew my objective 3 weeks in advance. They never revealed it. And they gave me the landing rights across their beaches, the air rights across their mountains to fly in. They moved troops along the border when they heard I was moving against the border so they could catch what we called the leakers, the enemy trying to get back across. So it's a very complex issue, but I wanted to address Pakistan because remember, again, this is a country that has lost more soldiers killed and wounded than all of NATO combined in this fight. So it's nothing simple as you try to define where we have common ground and where we don't. Furthermore, they have lost over 10 times as many innocent civilians since this war began than the United States did on 9/11. They've lost upwards of 30,000. And this goes on and on and on. You can imagine if our police on a daily basis were having to deal with the kind of things their police are having to deal with. So it's a very, very difficult area. Those are the areas I want to talk about most. Let me just talk about Iran for a minute, then let's open to questions, see what's on your mind. Iran had been gone to NATO for 3 years. When I left the theater about 4 years ago, they assigned me to NATO because they thought I needed to become more sophisticated, you know. So I went up there and I worked for a couple years. I came back, and now I've spent most of my life working in this area. And as the intelligence officers were briefing me, because it was rather, I didn't get much warning I was going to this job, as they were briefing me, they told me, well, over in Egypt now, the Iranians are working there. When Libya blew up, they got over there. In Syria, they're supporting the Syrians as they kill innocent people in the streets. Lebanese Hezbollah in Lebanon is armed and is a complete proxy of Tehran. In Iraq, it is the Iranian militias that caused most of our casualties, not al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda has been decimated. They're still dangerous. I'm not declaring them out yet, like some people are. But it's been the Iranian-backed guerrillas that have cost us most of our soldiers' lives in the last 2 years. Interesting. Down here, they've been caught spying in Kuwait, been sentenced to death. In Bahrain, they tried to take over the anti-government demonstrations and use them for their own way. Down here in Yemen, they are helping the enemy down there, the terrorists down there. So you see, everywhere you go, you find Iran's hand, and the centrifuges of their nuclear program keep spinning. So it is a very difficult situation. The United Nations, the last Security Council resolution, we're under about a year and a half, 2 years old. The people who voted for it were, well, UK and United States, France, you know, those kind of countries, but also China, Russia. Now, what issues can you imagine would draw China, Russia, the United States, France all together, Germany, Austria? Why would all of them vote together? That shows just how alarming this issue is. This is not a manufactured issue. This is a real issue. And so we'll see how there's a new report coming out shortly on their nuclear program. But I just tell you that this part of the world will continue to boil for some time. But we need our strategic choices. What do we need to do? What do we leave to the UN? What do we do with our friends? Just a reminder, for all the decades I've fought over here, I've never fought in an all-American formation. I always had Afghan boys beside me or UAE boys flying airplanes overhead. I've had Kuwaitis who were part of my assault battalion, which was not an easy job. And the Kuwaiti boys joined my battalion that would open the ways through the minefields going into Desert Storm. So at times you think, well, all these Muslims are a bunch of kooks. United Arab Emirates, ladies and gentlemen, in the Marines, we're pretty proud of our fighting ability. We call them Little Sparta. They stand by us through thick and thin. They're fighting alongside us in Afghanistan. They fought alongside us in Kuwait back in Desert Storm. They're just a wonderful little country, and they've got courage like you won't, political and military courage like you won't believe. So I share that just to give you some of the complexities of the region there. But what I really want to do again, Phil, is answer questions here because, and I'm pretty thick-skinned, ladies and gentlemen. So if you've got something bugging you, let's just have it out. I'm a Richland guy home, and I can give you the straight scoop. And those of you in the press, please don't put me in trouble this time, okay? Yes, sir.
General Mattis, first of all, on behalf of all of us, thank you for your service. My question is this. The New York Times over the weekend is reporting that the United States is negotiating a formal military alliance with the Gulf states. And as a part of that, we would maintain 1 or 2 brigades in Kuwait. I wonder if you would like to make a little news with a Richland Dateline by either confirming or denying that today.
Yeah. That's probably exactly what I won't do. You know, it's really a privilege to be invited back to polite company because after some of my public statements, it's an honor to be invited to any polite company anymore. But I think they're making news out of something that's really what it's always been. We have an operating base in Bahrain. We have thousands of troops who've been in Kuwait really since 1991. And if their thesis was we're going to pull everybody out, then certainly they can say this is a big change. In fact, we will maintain a very robust military-to-military relationship. And let me just point out why. It's not just so that we generals get to go to dinners with each other. When Egypt blew up and we had very little contact with the Egyptian body politic because, again, it was all Mubarak. He ran the country. So when he left, who do you talk to? Well, fortunately, because on a military-to-military level we can communicate, and we've been doing exercises with each other for years, I can pick up the phone and call the commander of the Egyptian military. So you maintain the dialogue that's so fundamental if you're trying to keep this from going into a violence kind of situation. And oftentimes soldiers, because of the responsibilities we have, are listened to more when things are going topsy-turvy like that. So we will maintain that sort of relationship, and each country, it's bilateral. It's us and Jordan. They allow our sailors and Marines to train at their camps. That's our agreement there. With Bahrain, that's been the home port of the Fifth Fleet since 1947. And even as old as I am, that's older than me. So they've stuck by us for all these years, and we're going to stick by them as well. We have to look at what is the appetite fiscally, financially for our country to continue it. But these countries are also willing to stand up on their own 2 feet. They just need us to kind of give them confidence, and we will continue to give them confidence out there.
And the combat brigade in Kuwait?
We've maintained the combat brigade there since 1991. It's very quiet. It trains out there. It's a great training ground for them. I don't think the decision's been made on that yet, and I maintain confidentiality, obviously, on what I say to the people I still have to say sir to. So I can't go into details, but the theme, I think, is quite correct. We're remaining engaged, and we're going to stay out there on a mill-to-mill level, even if the wars are hopefully continue to become a thing of the past out there, if we can keep the peace. Yes, back here, there was a question back in the back, I think.
Similar question.
Okay. Yes.
General, if the current budget proposals to reduce the Marine Corps to 146,000 troops goes through, will you have the forces to address any kind of Iran-inspired problems with the militias in Iraq, or will we end up with another situation like South Vietnam in 1973 when we withdrew and then could not go back in and support our ally?
Yeah, what a great question. First of all, yes, we'll have enough troops. Now, let me just caveat that by saying all strategy is you come up with what are the ends you want to achieve, foreign policy, and what are the means, and one of those means, not the primary one, is the military. And then if you don't have enough military, you adjust your ends. And you saw that in a rather dramatic way with the example you gave. We're going to do less with our military in the future, but we're not going to do it less well. I may not do as much, but when we come, it will be an elite organization that is ethically based, that is very competent militarily, and you would not want to crush it. You wouldn't want to take it on. It will be very, very difficult for you. There are going to be cutbacks, though. We live in an age when there's going to be cutbacks in the size of the military, and with the country facing the fiscal situation it is right now, Secretary Panetta has been very clear he wants to keep it strong, but at the same time, some cutbacks are coming for certain. We'll have enough to do what I need to do. First of all, to put it very bluntly, more than the commanders got South America or Africa or Europe or the Pacific, I get first choice, to put it very bluntly. So I will have enough. That won't be a problem. We will have to look at strategically, and maybe you've read that we're looking to rebalance with more of a focus on the Pacific. And so there'll be a balancing out there. But that's one of the reasons we maintain these good relations with the other militaries in the region, so they pick up the slack. And they're willing to do so. We just have to help them do it with our trainers and some of our weapons that are quite willing to buy. Sure. Yes. Right here. Okay, got three of you right there.
In the region, through 4 or 5 administration changes in our government, how have those affected what you've been able to accomplish?
You mean it over these decades I've been serving out there? Yeah. Right. Yeah. You know, I'm one of those who's actually quite when the American people vote, you know, I'm pretty comfortable with whoever you put in. He's the commander-in-chief, and to me, it's how well can I do it. Now, if I ever thought it was something immoral, I'd be back fishing on the Columbia River tomorrow. So I'll just tell you that the American military right now is a national treasure. Everybody in the world looks at it with envy. So the question, thank you. And each of the presidents is their own man. They're all different. I've gotten the chance now to meet presidents because, you know, for a guy who ought to be pumping gas in Pasco or Kennewick, Richland, I've gotten up to a level where I get to meet with them. I'll just tell you, they're decent people trying to solve problems. They've got their own view of the world, and every one of them's trying to help in this region. The challenge is not our leadership. It's the problems that have been out here for thousands of years in some cases, the religious hatreds that are endemic and that sort of thing. So I don't come to you with any reluctance to say that I've been well taken care of during all of the battles. And sometimes I fought them as a very young officer, and sometimes now at a much higher level. But I get support, is the bottom line. I do not feel hindered by that. But thanks for the question. Yes, sir.
What about nuclear in Iran?
Nuclear in Iran. The centrifuges keep spinning. The United Nations has been adamant they will stop. There will be a new report coming out in about 30 days or less, and it will tell us what they're doing. But it will be a United Nations report. I will just tell you that I can't give you much reason for optimism on that issue. But that said, you've got the UN putting economic sanctions on that have actually been quite effective in many, many ways. Something that very few people thought would work, and they've been much more effective than we anticipated. And it's a country now that has virtually no strategic ally. They can't win the affections of their own people. They've messed up their country's economy. The problem is they're still dangerous. They're not 10 feet tall. It's a little bit like having a teenage boy in the house. You know, there's a lot of slamming of doors and raised voices, you know, around these guys. But at the same time, they have promoted people who act recklessly. Some of their young officers who did dumb things as young officers, they promoted them to general and admiral, and eventually institutions get the behavior they reward. These guys could start a war. And so every day out in the waters, out in these waters here where our Fifth Fleet is, right here, in the Gulf, in the Persian Gulf, Arab Gulf, there are close runs every day as we try to maintain the peace and the freedom of navigation for probably 17% of all the world's oil comes right out through there. And it's more than that if you look at the ripple effect of what would happen if we lost those sea lanes. So it's not a good situation. The nuclear is one aspect of it, but it's got Secretary Clinton's full attention, and we'll see if she's able to pull it off. I can't give you a good answer is the bottom line, a positive answer. Yes.
General, good intelligence is critical, and I know you probably want more every day. Can you give us a feel for boots on the ground that provide intelligence, other agencies of our government? Are we working together, and can you get as good intelligence when you want it?
Yeah, I mean, there are secrets, Captain, and there's mysteries. If it's an enemy secret, I generally know it. If it's a mystery, like do they intend to make a bomb, we don't know they've made their mind up yet. They've obviously got all the parts together. Do they really want to make it with all that entails, including negatives? So when it comes to a mystery, then you just try and get the most intelligent people going and have them look at. The intelligence services work very well together. There is none of what you may have experienced during your career where there was kind of like, I got a secret. There came a point after 9/11, it was just like a lightning bolt, I think. But today, like when I landed in Afghanistan in 2001, I had a CIA officer on my staff, actually as part of it. And that gives you, of course, access to all of the best, organization going on this. But I don't hurt for intelligence at all, Mysteries are mysteries, and so who knows.
One last question.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
You said that the enemy strategically plants itself all over the area. It came here at 9/11. I think you've already answered my question by our military and the envy that we have from everyone, but what makes you feel safe?
What makes me feel safe?
What makes you feel safe?
You know, ma'am, I'm not paid to feel safe. And I'm not trying to be lighthearted. I'm paid to be a sentinel. And tell you the truth, if I ever start feeling safe, I've probably gotten complacent with this part of the world. So what gives me confidence is our intelligence and the selfless nature and the competence of our young troops. Plus, there's the sense that nothing they face will be worse than what you faced. And I'll give you an example of this. We had gotten orders to attack a place called Fallujah, and I was putting my units in place. And about midnight one night, time for generals to get out of the way. It's time for the young guys to go to work. And as I was walking back about a mile in the dark with a half dozen of my radio operators, the enemy created a little mischief nearby. And so I got down and we checked in with the corporal who was there with his squad. He said, yeah, no sweat, General, we'll take care of it. And so everything got taken care of. And this was the assault company. This is a company that's laying there cold on the ground until just before dawn when they would attack first to open the hole into the city. And these were young boys going into their first fight, by and large. This is a very young battalion. And while we just stayed there for a minute, make sure that that nothing else was going to happen. And I heard a young fellow ask the corporal, again, probably not old enough to buy a beer legally, he asked the old corporal, hey, Corporal, you think Fallujah is going to be real bad in the morning? And because we've got ladies present, I won't quite quote him. But he basically said, hush and get some sleep. We took Iwo Jima. Fallujah won't be nothing. That's what gives me confidence right there, ma'am, that example has come down through the generations and the lads are ready to go. I'll just tell you, too, that it does come down to them. I'm very honored to be here, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be in Washington, D.C. here in a few hours, and I assure you I will be missing this place like the dickens when I'm there. And I'll be back in the Middle East next week. But I'll just tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that the heavy burden's all carried by the young people. You know it, I know it, but I only stand here because I've been fortunate enough to rise up in rank. The burden is carried by them. I still remember walking into a town called Ramadi a few years ago, and all the enemies shooting down the street at us, and I came up behind a squad that's shooting down the street at them. And I walked up and asked the single stupidest question any general has asked his troops in 235 wonderful years of Marine Corps history. I walked up and said, hey guys, what's going on? And the corporal, I'm sure convinced that the village idiot had gotten loose, looks over his shoulders at me, ladies and gentlemen. And he said, well, General, we're just taking the fun out of fundamentalism over here, okay? My point to you is, of course, it's the spirits of the lads, and that's what makes me feel. I know who's the good guys in this fight, and I know who's the bad guys, and I know who's going to win. And so I just stick with our team. And on our worst day, this is still a better country than any other place in the world, and we'll get it back on track. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Honored to be here. grab a seat, ladies and gentlemen. He's now going to
Yes.
tell me if I passed or not.
We have a certificate of appreciation for the General. The Rotary Club of Richland wishes to express its appreciation to you for taking your valuable time to make this presentation to our club. In your honor, we will make a donation to the Rotary International Polio Plus Foundation, which is working to eradicate polio in the world. Thank you for your service to our country. Semper Fi. And I have one more thing for you also. We didn't know if you were a golfer, but we wanted to give you some golf balls with the City of Richland logo on them.
Then I'll take it up. Thanks very much. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen.
It was a great presentation. Thank you very much for coming today. Would like to thank all of our guests, visiting Rotarians, everyone that came today. Sure pleasure to have you. Now, if you would please rise for entering of the colors. Okay, thank you very much. Next week we have Jim Bussey, the superintendent of Richland School District. And with that, meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.